Parents of school-age children learned this week that in-person classes would resume across the province. But students at Laurentian University wondered what their futures might hold as the Sudbury, Ontario school looked to the courts for help with, quote, unprecedented financial challenges. With us to get a better sense of both stories, in the east end of the capital city of Ontario, Caroline Alphonso, education reporter for the Global Mail. And in Oakwood Village, Alex Usher, president of Higher Education Strategy Associates. Hello to you both. I know it's been a very busy week for both of you, so we appreciate you making time for us. Some of the topics we're going to talk about will overlap. So Caroline, I'll start with you, and then Alex, I'll bring you into the conversation. The Education Minister, Stephen Lecce, held a press conference on Wednesday to announce that schools will be returning. Some schools had already been back. Can you please give us an idea of the back-to-school plan for the schools that are going back?
So, like a few other provinces, Ontario closed its schools to in-class instruction right after the holiday break. Alberta had done so as well, Nova Scotia. And so kids were learning remotely. And the province since then has had a bit of a staggered return for different districts. So northern boards, for example, returned a week after the holiday break to in-class learning. And, my kids, your kids, they're still home learning, and the plan, at least for now, is for Peel, York, and Toronto, which is the final three boards, to return next week, the following week, and Halton, Durham, a bunch of Southern Ontario boards are to return on Monday.
Can you give us a sense of how the news was received by the public?
Nam, it has been a mixed emotional journey for parents and for educators. I know in speaking to a number of parents, there is a lot of relief that their children will be back in the classroom learning. A lot of parents have had a lot of difficulty with remote learning. Children have had meltdowns. There has been frustration with online learning, having connectivity issues and things like that. But there's also, with that comes a bit of nervousness because we don't know what to expect when students are back. Yes, they're all being masked. And yes, the government has introduced a number of measures. People want more, understandably. And with a variant sort of now showing its appearance in the community, how will that impact schools is another question that has been floating. I know there's a lot of teachers, my kids, who are excited to be back and happy to be back, but also nervous to be back.
Would you say that some of the questions were about why now? Why are we going back now?
I think so. And, the minister has been pressed, and so has Dr. Williams, the chief medical officer of health, has been pressed by reporters as to what is the threshold, what are the benchmarks for reopening schools? And there hasn't been a clear answer on that. Why is Toronto, Peel, and York, for example, reopening the following week? What is the government looking for in those three areas to reopen schools a week later? We don't have clear answers on that. And what is the threshold to close schools again? What is the government looking to see or not see in the community, in schools, in order to open and close them? And I think there is a lot of worry about that, understandably.
And in the time of COVID, a week is a very long time. Some schools are going back on Monday, but in the GTA, most of the schools are not going back until February 16th. So a lot could happen between that time. Has the minister addressed that?
He hasn't, and that was the question asked to him this week. No clear answers on any of these questions. There's no transparency here, despite the amount of pressing that has happened. I think, in this day and age, we need clear answers because we are sending our children to school. We are sending teachers and other staff to school. New York had some thresholds that they kind of changed here and there, but at least there was some metric, and we need something like that.
I know there's been a lot of concern with the B.1.1.7 variant because, as we hear from the scientists, that it is more transmissible. The government has said that they are increasing safety protocols. What do they mean by that when they say that?
So in the return to school after the holiday break, the government announced a few new measures. Not exactly new, some would say. For example, one of the things is they have upgraded the masking mandate protocol, whereas kids from grades 1 to 3 are now required to wear masks in the classroom and outdoors as well. It used to be 4 and up. Well, my kids in Toronto have been wearing masks since the fall, and they've started it in kindergarten. So why is this done now when boards have been proactive in masking kids quite early on in the fall? The other thing they're doing is they're updating screening guidelines. Again, in a number of places, those screening guidelines were already in place. They have promised more asymptomatic testing and more testing, but that will be directed by public health units. And one of the concerns that has been raised there by a number of doctors and by a number of educators is it hasn't been spelled out properly what that testing will look like. How will it be directed? Who will do the testing? We have so many questions, and kids are going back to school Monday, and kids have been back to school for a number of weeks now.
There's so many moving parts during this whole pandemic and for this back to school plan. Can you imagine any plan that would alleviate the concerns of the public, teachers, the government, and public health?
I think one of the things that this government has kept saying is schools are safe. And I think, talking about schools being safe or unsafe, it's like a circular discussion. You can talk about that forever. I think what we need to say is there is some risk. There is community transmission. There is some risk. These are the things that we're doing to mitigate those risks. And people, I don't think it would assure many people, but at least, you're being realistic about what it is going on right now. And that hasn't happened. I think, we wanted some of these things that are being put in place now. There are a lot of questions about why this did not happen in the fall. And one of the things that is of grave concern to educators and to doctors is the distancing that happens in classrooms, and that has not been addressed. You have classrooms with 20 plus kids right now, and with a more transmissible variant of the virus. How is that going to impact classrooms when kids are sitting right next to each other, merely a feet apart, if that, in classrooms?
One thing the minister did mention was the voluntary tests for asymptomatic testing. What is that? Do you get a sense if that's giving some people a little bit of reassurance?
It does. I mean, sick kids, the Ontario pediatric hospitals have called for more robust testing in schools. They've called for more sort of contact tracing, more isolation. And I think that does give people some assurances. But I think, testing is sort of what happens when a kid is sick or when a staff member is sick. What are we doing at the front end to make sure that schools are safer, as safe as possible? Are we making sure that kids are spread apart so that the virus is less transmissible? Are we ensuring things like that are happening in schools? And that, I remember, Nam, at the beginning of this, there was a lot of talk among school boards when they were planning for reopening on using community centers, on using the Ontario Science Centre, for example, for classroom space, spreading kids out across the system. That never materialized. That never happened. And I think that would have made a lot of families and a lot of educators feel a little more comfortable about a return to school.
And that asymptomatic testing, I should mention, is voluntary. So, Alex, I want to bring you into this conversation. And before we talk about Laurentian University and what's been happening there, we should mention that in the interest of transparency, Steve Paikin, the anchor of this show, is the chancellor of Laurentian University. So, Alex, get us caught up to speed. What happened to Laurentian University this week?
It sought creditor protection and basically told the world that it had cash flow for about another 4 weeks. And so it was a very long burning problem. This is an institution that's run deficits 7 of the last 8 years, has been running, I think it's accrued deficit is about 20 million just on the short-term stuff, if you keep out all the buildings and things like that. And it turned out, when you look at these filings, that there were really 2 things that had been going on. The first is that they had been sort of covering that 20 million, or maybe a little bit more, it's not quite clear, uh, through cash management, right? If you're a $200 million organization, the way Laurentian is, often you can just keep paying your bills by, just extending your payment schedules a little bit and waiting for the next bit of money to come in. And it turned out that, in fact, the way they'd been doing that was taking money out of their restricted accounts and putting it over into their unrestricted accounts, which is very dangerous. It turns out they took about $12 or $13 million in funds that the Ottawa granting councils had given to researchers and put it over into the operating grants. The second thing that happened was that they lost their line of credit. So this is an institution. This is common with many institutions, right? They get a lot of money in January from tuition fees. They get a lot of money in September, and they take a line of credit to get them from, say, March to September. And normally at Laurentian, that goes about $13, $15, $17 million a year. They do that. For some reason, Desjardins, which was their main line of credit, and RBC, which was a secondary one, both declined to offer them a line of credit this winter. And that happened sometime in the late summer or early fall. It's not really clear when. But as soon as that happened, they couldn't bridge the gap anymore. And so that put them into this position where they announced at the beginning of the week that the money runs out in 28 days.
You say late summer, late fall. 4 weeks for the students who are going to the school, for the faculty, the people who are employed there. This must be, shocking news with the background of the pandemic. How exactly does an institution as big as a university run out of money?
I have almost no way of answering that, because I mean, everybody's in shock everywhere because they keep looking at this and saying, how did it happen? And I think the answer is it's a lot of little things, right? And the main one is that everyone kept saying, well, a $1 million deficit isn't so bad, a $2 million deficit isn't so bad, but they never secured that. Other institutions that have had taken out, that have borrowed money to cover operating costs, and I'm going to give an example of McGill here. McGill, 35, 40 years ago, when David Johnston was president, they deliberately took out about $70 million in loans just to cover operating expenses. And the idea was that, they'd shame the government into funding them properly. That didn't work too well. But the point is, it was secured. They went to the bond markets and they got the money. Laurentian tried to do it through cash management. And just everybody's confused about why you would have done that. Presumably there's a story there, probably not a very convincing one, but we haven't heard it yet because we haven't heard anything from Laurentian in 4 days now. It was Monday afternoon that they came up with their, that they came up with that announcement, and it's been radio silence since then. So there's all these questions and nobody to answer them.
I know this is an unprecedented thing to happen. Is it unusual for the university then to go quiet?
Well, it's hard to say because we've got nothing to put it against. I think in fairness to the institution, what they're probably saying is, look, the main thing right now is to reach some kind of deal with the union. If we go public, then we're bargaining in public, and we don't want to do that. I suspect that's the reason. But look, I don't think that helps when you got so many people who are
who want answers.
What's the word? Who want answers? Who need answers? They got 1,000 employees, academic, non-academic. And they need answers because they want to know if they got jobs. And it's quite clear that layoffs are on the table at some point in this process. I don't know how many, I don't know who they would be, but it's quite clear. And they need answers. Obviously, I think everybody knows you can't get complete answers right now because they're still in a very uncertain process, but they need more reassurance than they're getting.
I know a lot of people are probably wondering, we are in a pandemic, how much of this has to do with maybe this university having low enrollment?
Not at all. I know that's a line. I'm not sure why that's a line that Laurentian is pushing, but if you look at their numbers, they're not down over the last 7-8 years. They're pretty good. It's true that they are getting fewer local students because the demographics of that part of Northern Ontario are pretty damaging. But generally speaking, Laurentian's done a pretty good job of getting students from the GTA and from Ottawa to make up for that. And so that's I don't know why they're pushing that line. And I think the other thing to remember is they've chosen not to go after international students. Most universities in Ontario have brought in a lot of international students over the last 6-7 years. I think if Laurentian had done the same at the same kind of rate as other institutions in the province, they'd have had an extra $8 million a year. In 2018, 19, 2019, 20, and that would have caused this whole problem to go away. So are there enrollment problems? Yeah, but I think they're of Laurentian's own making. It's not something that's happening to them because of demographics.
You mentioned the international foreign students, and the foreign students can pay 5 times as much in tuition. Some universities have been able to excel with this revenue model. Which schools have done the best, do you think?
Well, University of Toronto gets more money from international students than it gets from Queen's Park. I mean, that's the big one, and a lot of them are paying sort of $40,000 or more, which is more than places like Laurentian can charge. Laurentian charges, I think, about 27, 28. I mean, Toronto is the big success story. There would be a few others. Certainly on the college side, you've got place Centennial's over 50% international student now. There's some other big ones that are heading that way, and so you can make that business model work if you want to. I mean, I recognize that some people would say that's a bad business model. It's risky. It gets the province off the hook, and there's merit to all those things. But if you're an institution and you got to pay the bills, it's sort of a strategy that you get forced to very quickly by the policies, not just of this Conservative government, but of previous governments as well, which have vastly underfunded the post-secondary system in Ontario.
I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. How do you think this is going to get resolved?
Well, they clearly have Laurentian has what's called DIP, and it's a debtor in possession. So they have a $25 million bridging deal with somebody. It's not clear who from the bank, the filings, but it's conditional on some restructuring happening, and it's conditional on this creditor protection thing. So we got to see what that'll play out over the next 2 weeks. They're going to need some kind of extra funding or some kind of loan from the province. They're going to need some kind of package from the province come about May. I mean, look, the university's too big to fail. Nobody's going to let a university in Sudbury go under. But the conditions of whatever the bailout is might be pretty onerous. I would think that part of it is going to be a good chunk of the board of directors is going to have to go. In a sense, for leading the institution into this. But beyond that, it's really hard to say.
I want to ask you both the same question, this next question. The future of education in Ontario seems to be at a crossroad. Kids in primary and secondary school have had disruptions in their learning, and post-secondary school is also struggling as well. Is this something that worries you? Caroline, I'll start with you.
Yes, it is something that is worrying, and I am hearing from teachers and school board officials across the country about sort of the learning and people, it's controversial, but the learning gaps that are happening as a result of this, and what this means for this generation of kids. So yes, it is worrying on many levels, not only, the academic level, but also the developmental level for some of the younger kids, and, what's happening for high school students on, with athletics and their social elements there. So yes, it is worrying what's going to happen here.
And Alex?
The thing is, I don't think we're going to see any new money coming into the sector, even though it's, as I said, it's badly funded. It's so badly funded that every other province is above the national average. Like Ontario drags the national average down that far. Ontario is not alone in this. We're seeing this across Canada. Governments are just saying we don't want to pay for post-secondary anymore. And the institution's instinct, which Laurentian rejected in part to its at its own peril, was to say we're going to go after international student dollars. If there's no new money, and it's really hard to see where new money is going to come from given post-pandemic public finances, we're just going to keep rolling down this path. At a certain point, people are going to say enough. But the problem is, if there's no public money, and we don't want to ask domestic students to pay more tuition, and we don't want to take the tuition dollars of international students, there's only one other way to do that, and that's to shrink the system. And that does, I don't mean by that you necessarily you're getting rid of institutions, but you're making smaller institutions. It means you're going to have fewer profs. It means you're going to have fewer support staff. I'm not sure there's another way out of this 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
We only have a few minutes left, but another question to both of you. I'll start with you again, Caroline. When you think about the past year of school closings and openings and closings and openings, what are the biggest lessons?
This government and the teacher unions have been at odds, to put it mildly, after what happened, what seems like a long time ago, but what happened last year with the strikes. And one of the lessons, one of the missing components in all of this has been the fact that educators have not been at many of these tables to talk about what is happening in classrooms. When I talk about educators, I'm talking about school board officials. I've been talking about teachers. And that is one of the lessons that I think has been sort of a missed opportunity here, where talking about, how to help kids with all sorts of issues has been missing from those tables, especially kids in sort of low-income neighborhoods, racialized kids who are not doing as well in school or are not connecting as well at this time.
And Alex, the same question to you. When you think about post-secondary education at the beginning of the pandemic and today, what lessons should the universities take away from this experience?
I think the most successful universities and colleges are the ones that have come through it as a community. So I think it's a very similar kind of lesson to what Caroline was saying. It's the places that are that communicate the best, where you've got the most open lines of communication, where people are being clear about expectations, where there's a lot of emphasis being put on, how do we help students the best. And I think, there's a number of universities that done okay jobs at that. I think there's certainly some spots at U of T that have done well. Carleton is the one that just stands out for me as having had exceptional leadership through a pandemic, and really supported their professors, supported their students. There's no point, taking bold leadership decisions, which are potentially contentious, in a quiet way and not explaining to things. I mean, again, I think this is the thing that's driving me the most crazy about Laurentian is that there's just no communication. Without communication inside a big institution like that, there's no trust. And if there's no trust, at the end of the day, yeah, financially you might be still standing, but I'm not sure there's actually a genuine community left to make the institution flourish. And that's got to be job one for the system's best leaders.
Well, I know you both have a very busy schedule, and we do appreciate the time. Thank you so much. We appreciate your insights.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.